Good morning. My name is Dwayne. I am one of the senior members at the UP Debating Union. And today what we're going to be doing, we were given the mandate to have a debate that involves active citizenship. And we will be doing this in a world school speaking style, which is 3 speakers per team. And they will essentially just, the proposition team will be in support of the motion, the opposition team will have arguments against the motion. And it's not necessarily a debate that we need to win, but it's a debate necessarily just for, it's also a demo debate. And the motion that we have today is the believes that countries with high crime rates should give their citizens more power, and we will have the speakers come up and present their arguments in favor and against the motion. They'll be speaking for 6 minutes for speech, and we will then obviously give it to the House to ask questions afterwards before our presentation on debating necessarily. So thank you. Okay, so without taking any more time, I'd like to call the first speaker from the Proposition House to open today's debate, to Francis Younger.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The motion we've been given today is that this House believes that countries with high crime rates should give more power to its citizens, and as our proposition, we strongly propose this motion. So essentially, the context that we're talking under when it comes to this debate is the fact that we're looking at countries that have got police not necessarily arriving on time whenever these crimes actually do happen. Secondly, the court systems not even necessarily defending the people and continuing to defend the perpetrators. The third thing is the fact that the people living in constant fear of the fact that the justice system is never really on their side. And the third thing is the fact that these merged relationships between the policemen and the people who are actually committing these crimes, which are confusing the people as to where exactly does this justice lie. This is the context in which we are talking about in this particular debate. And as the first speaker, I'll be dealing with the points that cover this debate in terms of the framework that comes with the concept of power, and the second part is dealing with the necessity of giving this particular power to the citizens that we're talking about. My second speaker is going to be talking about the issue of acting in the best interest of the citizens, as well as the issue of giving the power to the citizens that allows them to be banded together in this whole motion, right? So to get on to my first point of exactly what power are we talking about here and what type of power are we advocating for, right? So essentially, if we look at a country and how a country we understand it should be as our proposition, a democratic country, is that if we're looking at it from a perspective of if you compare it between a company and how a country is actually run, essentially if you think about it, the citizens are supposed to have 51% of ownership when it comes to that country. However, we see that in these particular countries, because of the fact that the justice system is so slacking, and because of the fact that the people don't necessarily have the direct say on how the justice should be infiltrated for these people, or how the justice is so shrewd over into protecting these particular perpetrators, it is only fair that we give 51% ownership rights to these citizens, for the citizens to take it upon themselves to bring about justice that they want to see in that particular context. And then the second thing is the fact that When it comes to this particular thing, is the fact that these crime rates, ladies and gentlemen, directly affect the citizens on a day-to-day basis, right? And as a result of them directly affecting the citizens on a day-to-day basis, an example that I will take is the fact that, let's say, for example, there suddenly just has been someone who was arrested for rape, right? And the court systems, because they're so busy and they just want to get rid of that particular situation, they send the person to jail, for example, overnight, they get bail, and guess what? That perpetrator goes right back into the streets, instilling the fear once more again into the citizens. Whereas the citizens, when they feel as though the justice has not been served, and when they feel as though the police is not doing their job, or the justice is not necessarily onto their side, then we deem it absolutely correct that they take it upon themselves to bring about the change that they want to see. Now, the reason why we're saying this is the fact that it's not necessarily undermining the role that the government has. Instead, it is sending a message to the government that this is where you are slacking in your job, and this is where you should actually be picking up pace and seeing how these crime rates are affecting us on a day-to-day basis. So that's just the whole conception of the power and how the framework of power would actually work in this whole entire thing. So the second point I'll be dealing with is the whole point of the necessity of giving this power to the citizens. Like I said earlier in my contextualization, the issue is the fact that you've got a justice system that is slacking in these particular countries. Let's look at how, for example, that the justice system, I'll take it in a minute here. The fact that the justice system is twofold, right? You've got the part where there's the arrest part of it, where the police are supposed to come directly to the crime, sort out whatever needs to be sorted out. And the second part, which is the court systems, which are supposedly supposed to be defending the people. And I'll get into those points after I take a few.
So now, why don't we just rather fix the court system and fix its efficiency rather than giving the power to
Thank you very much for that. The fact that you're even suggesting that we should be fixing the court system, how should we be fixing the court system, it's something that people have been crying out for so long, to the point where these particular things have been ignored, that these high crime rates are still happening and are still continuing to happen. So the people are tired of crying out and asking for those court systems to be fixed. And now they're saying that it's time for us to take the justice in our own hands. So like I said, back to my point of the necessity of doing this, and the reason why it has to be done, is the fact that, like I said, the justice system is twofold. Not the first part where the police are supposed to come on site and arrest the particular perpetrator, and the second part where the court systems are not pitching up for the people. The arrest part of it is the fact that in most of these countries, we need to look at what type of relationships have the police built with the perpetrators themselves in order to protect their particular mandate and however they're doing it in terms of their personal interests. That's not allowing them to fulfill their roles and duties as the policemen and the protectors of society. The second thing is the fact that when we're looking at the court systems themselves, they are designed to continuously defend the perpetrator and not necessarily the victim at all times. And as a result of that, the communities themselves, it is currently being done where there are these high crime rates. They're really taking a mandate upon themselves to bring about justice for themselves. And as a result of bringing that justice for themselves, they themselves are creating a safer environment for themselves, and what they believe is deemed to be fine for them, and not necessarily when their government is not necessarily pitching up and taking care of them in that particular moment. So essentially, what as some proposition we have proposed to you so far is the fact that this framework of power is very important to give to the citizens in the sense of we're dealing with a democracy, and in a democracy, 51% of people should be having the ownership and that direct part of things, and that's exactly what we're debating here. And then the second part has to do with the necessity of giving the power to the citizens. It's simply a matter of showing up when your government is not showing up. Thank you. Second speaker, first speaker side opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, if something is wrong with the society, crime is as a result of that. If something is wrong with the society, wouldn't the better thing be to go to that something fix it already, instead of giving this entire huge population of human beings the power to fix this tiny thing. What we're saying to you right now as team opposition is that what the opposition is proposing is completely wrong. They're saying that people should, citizens of the country should get a lot more power than the officials in that country, which is ridiculous. And I'm going to prove to you, I'm going to demonstrate to you how irradical and how ridiculous what they're saying is. But before I get to that, I would like to go through my case split for team opposition. My second speaker is going to be talking about the alternatives, the sensible alternatives to giving society so much power. And what I'll be doing is I'll be describing the nature of these countries which are infested by crime, and I'll also be explaining to you how giving citizens so much power will take away the role of policemen. Ladies and gentlemen, these countries which are crime-ridden, these are typically developing nations, such as South Africa. These countries have poor educational structures, these countries don't have high literacy rates, and these countries have individuals who have no idea how the criminal system works. These countries have individuals who cannot differentiate between petty theft and murder. How would a person such as myself be able to ascertain if a crime deserves, if a particular criminal deserves to die, or if a particular criminal deserves to go to jail, if a particular criminal not taken, if a particular criminal deserves to do some sort of community service? What I'm telling you right now is that the police, the law enforcement are very paramount in this system, because they're the ones who studied law, who studied crime. They know exactly the severity of the punishments to live not taken. Now, secondly, what we're saying as team opposition is that giving citizens so much power will take away the role of policemen. And how this will work typically is that if the citizens have power, if the citizens are the ones now who can deliver punishment to whoever has done crime, then why do we need policemen? And in that case, what should happen with the current policemen? What should happen with the other law enforcement groups that we have in South Africa? Should they just use their jobs? What should happen to them? And who will this affect? This will affect those policemen, the law enforcement groups, their families, and will also affect the criminals that are already arrested. Somebody else already has been arrested. This giving citizens the power wasn't active back when he was arrested. So what should happen to the criminals who are in prison now? Should they all be let go, and then now they can now be tested under this new system of law enforcement taken?
So on what grounds are you measuring the rationality of the citizens in terms of you deeming that they can't differentiate between what is theft and what is murder?
What I'm saying is a typical South African, such as myself, who doesn't study law, who doesn't study crime, will not be able to ascertain the severity of a punishment to be delivered to a criminal. What I'm saying to you is it takes a lot of education to know that this person did what, the motives, the mitigating factors. It takes someone, an expert, a law enforcement, to be able to render that punishment. Not someone like you, not someone like me. And the last point that I would like to bring forth is the fact that this whole idea of giving citizens power, it will in the end encourage mob justice. Mob justice is when an alleged criminal is beaten, humiliated, executed by a crime. It is a barbaric system where there's little to no evidence provided at all. These people are just being killed because a lot of the community believes that they did something wrong without any evidence at all. Or maybe the majority of the community doesn't like the person, and that's why they want to execute the person, humiliate the person, or beat the person or take it. So this type of system where the citizens are given a lot of power would only encourage mob justice at the end. And mob justice, as I said, is barbaric. Mob justice doesn't work because people are not given a fair trial. People are not assumed to be innocent until guilty. When the community doesn't like you, basically, they will just execute you or shine you out. And that is what the proposition wants at the end. The proposition also talked about how the justice system is lacking and how people are tired. But I just have to point out that she did not give any steps of how citizens currently are trying to take power into their own. She said that no, people are tired and the justice system is lacking. What we're saying to you is what would be better is fixing the justice system rather than giving this vast majority of people, 55 million individuals in South Africa, more than giving them the power to all of a sudden be able to ascertain if someone is a criminal or not. In conclusion, as the opposition, we're saying that giving citizens power isn't the right way to go. It's not the right way to combat crime. It will only increase crime in the end, if anything, and that the proposition is completely wrong. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I would just like to follow up to say that knowledge is a sense of power. And as citizens in our communities, each of us knows what's going on in your community. You, for example, know if there's a villain living next door to you, or a rapist, or extreme cases. You know what's going on in your community. But government does not necessarily know what is going on. So let's say, for example, you said that government will fix a tiny problem rather than taking it to the majority to fix a tiny problem. Okay, well, if you look at organizations have different hierarchical structures. So most organizations work from hierarchy. Who reports to who? So employees report to middle management reports to top management. So if you as a citizen have to go and report that pothole is starting to grow bigger in your community, it's going to take forever to reach the government, and once it's reached the government will have to replace the entire road and not a pothole. So if we give power to citizens, we can fix these tiny problems immediately. If we look at the majority's problems, let's take, for example, mine workers. Mine workers, individual problems don't mean much, but once you take those individual problems and make it a collective problem, and a collective agreement, you take it to the labor court and you unionize it, it can be solved much easier than the individual problem, where the individual idea would have been disregarded immediately. Okay. In the sense that the majority and society does not have a sense of ethics. Every person, according to Aristotle, has a sense of virtue ethics, norms and things that they conform to. This might have been established by your society or by your culture or by your household, but every person has a sense of or knows what is right and what is wrong. So
Point, ma'am. Would you be able to render a punishment, two different punishments, to a spree killer and a serial killer?
So it's all about setting a precedent. Okay. So both has the mindset of serial killing. Both has the mindset of destroying. Both has the mindset of destruction. But those are extremes. So those people will be dealt with by the mobs in society. The people who identify the people next to you, hey, that person living next to me is a serial killer. Okay, let's identify them, let's sort this out in the community. So it's not about the individual serial killers. Okay, and then, okay, if you take society will naturally conform to a case. So if we look at the Sono diagram in economics, the economy will move to point K star, which is the set state, a steady state in which your output levels or your investment levels equals to depreciation. Naturally, society will also conform to a steady state, and if we give society the power to set policies and procedures, they will find that steady state, and society will be able to function as a whole. So the fact is that higher crime rates affect citizens and not the government. It affects each and every one of us. It doesn't affect police, but it affects you as an individual. If you have crime in your area, you as an individual are uncertain about your area, you feel unsafe, you feel insecure. And if we identify those crime rates and we solve it and we move it, society will be able to function as a whole and effectively.
So we have a side proposition who seems to believe that all individuals have full knowledge of the law and will always use power for the greater interest of society. Right? And we know, as side opposition, that full power can lead to corruption. Alright, so moving on to my rebuttal, right? So I think both sides need to come to this agreement that there are problems in these countries with high crime rates, and we as side opposition are not denying that this crime rate needs to be fixed. Right? But first, we differ in the solution with proposition as to how this crime rate will be fixed. So, as mentioned by my first speaker, that we would rather put more time and energy into fixing our current legal system, as yes, it is problematic in these countries, but giving more power to citizens will only lead to the negative consequences that my first speaker has introduced you into. Okay, so to move on to my rebuttal, firstly that from first speaker we get told that these citizens have in these countries, there are merged relationships between the police and the community, and that is why the police are not taking the action that they are supposed to. But I think that speaker failed to see that, again, there are merged relationships between citizens and citizens. So if we're going to be putting citizens in charge of arresting their fellow friends and their fellow family members, that merged relationship is still existing. Right. And then kind of that onto my first point is that a system like this of arrest citizenship relies on people being rational and relies on people being reasonable, right? So it's kind of saying you require humans to act reasonably, to arrest people if there is reasonable belief that they are performing an action, and to use reasonable force. And we as side opposition disagree with this. So we get a quote from proposition saying that Aristotle says that all people have a sense of what is right and what is wrong, right? And we believe that this is not true in circumstances where we see countries such as Nigeria, Cameroon, other African countries where mob justice is taking place. So we see that we as humans, one, are extremely subjective, and secondly, we are very irrational due to our emotions and our emotive behaviors. So we see that if I was a person that was recently affected by a murder, for example, in my house, right? I'm going to be acting irrational in arresting somebody who is committing a murder, right? Because we are affected by our emotions. And that's what kind of leads to what my first speaker said, that this mob justice comes as a result because of these alleged criminals are now being humiliated, beaten, and executed by these people. So we believe that citizens will go to the extreme, right? That yes, some people may know the difference between right or wrong, but there are extremists in societies. And then my second point is kind of, if we implement this arrest citizenship, it's going to make the government even more complacent within their roles. Right, so we see that our government in South Africa, for example, we are a country with a high crime rate, right? Our police have a mandate to prevent, combat, investigate crime, maintain public order, and protect our inhabitants of the republic. So the first speaker came up and said, no, well, we're just adding to their role, so we're going to help the police, and if we disagree with what the police are doing, the citizens can now take it in their hand. But we believe that these two can't work hand in hand. We believe that the citizens will then kind of just get all this power, making the police more complacent than what they currently are. And this will take away their primary role and their primary mandate to uphold and enforce the law. In terms of their second speaker, she spoke about the solo model and the economic benefits that we can receive from this whole motion. And we believe that this is not actually true, because we believe that their side is actually making us economically worse, right? By having these implications of a complacent policeman, of possibilities of mob justice, we believe that that will not actually help our economy in the long run at all. In terms of the aspects about democracy, right? We still believe that citizens in these countries will still have their democratic rights. So they can still vote for their government. We don't believe that democracy can be equated to giving them full power in terms of the security measures of a country. And then lastly, what my first speaker also said, that I would be speaking about the alternatives. So here, and the topic today at the World Speech Day is that we still want active citizenship, and we don't want to take that away as side opposition. So we do believe that there are alternatives for citizens to be participating in these countries in the crime field, but that doesn't mean that they deserve the whole power. So we know that we as citizens still have a responsibility to report these crimes and to be aware of the crime rates, and perhaps through fixing other problems, like my first speaker mentioned, about lack of education, lack of knowledge of the law. That is where the crux of this debate should go, that we should give them more knowledge in terms of the law, in terms of their constitutional rights, in terms of crime, not give them the physical power to go and arrest people. And thereby still upholding active citizenship in these instances. So for all these reasons, we as side opposition say that high crime rates in countries, the citizens there should not be given more power, as this will just lead to the detrimental consequences that I've been mentioned.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sneha Shamini, and I'm the third speaker in side opposition. So what we found is that we were grossly misunderstood by side opposition in today's debate. What we were looking at is first the issues that I identified in this debate are two. Firstly, that of the nature of countries with high crime rates, and secondly, what it means to actually give power to citizens, which is what side opposition actually failed to understand for the majority of the debate, and it became like a parallel debate where they didn't understand the concept of power, and actually giving power to citizens doesn't mean that individuals can do as they please. Justice is still very prevalent in this model that we've been in today's debate. So firstly, looking at this issue of the nature of countries with high crime rates, firstly we look at in countries where there are high crime rates, why is power the problem? Why is the lack of power the problem? And also, how is giving the power that we have framed in today's debate going to be a solution to this problem? Also going to alleviate this high crime rate and provide justice for these citizens. So firstly, we have this idea given by side proposition that citizens are actually not even in their right minds to assign justice, and they can't differentiate between like a really low level crime and a really high level crime, because apparently, I don't know, citizens equate murder with like stealing bread or something. Firstly, what we told is that this is not true, and frankly quite insulting to the rationality of citizens. Just because you're in a developing country doesn't mean that you're stupid. And then the other thing is they tell us that, citizens are actually very irrational because they're emotional. So for example, if someone commits a crime against you, then it's very problematic if we have this kind of mob justice and citizens have power, because that person is like, oh, I have power, I can do whatever I want, and then they go and kill you. But what we tell you is, first of all, people aren't acting as individuals, and I'll elaborate on that, on how exactly our model is going to work. People aren't acting as individuals, they're acting as a collective in the name of citizens. Okay, and then secondly, when they tell us that human beings are irrational, what we tell you is that the courts are run by human beings who are also irrational, and just because you are not like invested in the situation doesn't mean that you're not going to get triggered and get like emotional about something that you hear in the court. So for example, if I was like this judge who was educated and I heard something about like a rape case, I would be quite emotional, because the country that I live in renders me very emotional and triggered when I hear about rape, because I live in a country where 1 in 3 women are going to be sexually assaulted in their lifetimes. So another thing that they tell you is that, we should give the power to officials because officials, are educated. And our response to this is you already questioned the validity of education systems in South Africa, right? So the first opposition speaker came here and he told us that, education in these developing countries isn't that good. if officials are educated in these developing countries and the education systems in these countries aren't that good, what guarantees that these officials are even that good? Okay, what guarantees that these officials are actually going to promote the justice that side opposition so wishes that, we're going to promote? They also said that, it takes education to know that something is wrong. If it takes, education and a law degree to know that something is wrong, then opposition, who are you to come here today and tell us what is right and wrong? Who are you, side opposition? With what qualifications did you come here today and tell us that, no, mob justice should not be a thing, it's wrong? Because if you don't have a law degree by your own admissions, then you shouldn't be able to tell us what's right and wrong in today's debate. They also said it will increase crime, but they never gave us any analysis on how this is going to be so. There was no premise presented to us on how it's going to be so that crime is going to be increased, which we feel, just was really neglectful of it. And also another thing that we want to challenge is, thank you, is that there's actually this thing called justice, okay? Where they told us that, full power can lead to corruption. If full power can lead to corruption, the full power that the government currently has can lead to corruption by their own admission. So we obviously can see that there's a problem in which the government has full power. And also another thing is we are not proposing full power. Our first speaker came here and she laid it out to you very nicely, in which we say that look at an example of a company and how a company operates. The country is the company. The company is falling apart. Individuals need to step forward. So if you are having shares in the company, the citizens need to have 51%. That's not full power. Last I checked, full means 100%, not 51. Now the second issue that we want to challenge is that of what it means to actually give power to citizens. In which Younger spent a lot of time framing power and telling you that it means, giving control to citizens by virtue of their rights, but it's not absolute control. It's not, it's not just like reckless control and anarchy control. It's, the control to be able to influence the outcome if they feel that the government is slacking. Because it's true, the government does slack. Everyone knows that the government slacks. Now, who's going to be there to correct the government? Oh my gosh, my time. Another thing is they spoke about, the alternative is fixing the current legal system, but with what education and qualification do you have to be telling us how to fix the current legal system if you're telling us that the legal system is already messed up already? We spoke about the different stages of justice. We spoke about two stages. Firstly, fetching the person who is in the wrong, and secondly, of actually convicting the person. They never dealt with the level in which people who are doing wrong are not actually being fetched, are not actually being arrested. The issue of policemen wasn't challenged in this debate, and it needed to be dealt with, let alone the whole thing about people actually being convicted when they're wrong, because the truth is, the current justice system protects the perpetrator more than the victim. So, another idea that they gave us is that citizens should have more knowledge, and they gave us this kumbaya idea of, we should educate citizens, etc., etc. Who's going to be giving this education to citizens where, the citizens are currently going to have so much knowledge and report crimes, etc., etc.? Who's going to be doing this if in these developing countries there's no resources, there's no officials who care enough, who aren't corrupt enough to be educating these? So in conclusion, what we see is that the model that we presented to you is actually what works, because side opposition is living in this kumbaya world where everything's just going to be great and fine and we're going to educate citizens. But the truth is, the government is messed up, and yeah.
My name is Gerard. The motion of today, this House believes that countries with high crime rate should be given more power to their citizens. We agree that crimes exist, but our alternative is a decision: fixing the state and do away with corruption and justice. My question for the government is that what kind of power do citizens need to act on the crime? How will giving more power to the citizen? How will giving more power to citizens do it without disturbing the government's role? First of all, the first speaker said how court systems are not defending the people. This is false. Giving 51% ownership to the citizens, we not agree on that. It's like taking the power of the state. Court systems are busy and just giving bails to criminals. This is false accusations and proposals. Justice is defending the crimes, not victims. This is false also. Government does not know exactly what is happening in their community. This is false also. There are community police forums, there are community leaders in the areas. Government is fully aware of this, every action that is happening in the community. High crime rate affects the citizens, not the government. In this one, we also not agree. These people who are working in the government system are also citizens of the country. Our alternative is that law enforcement, we must improve the investigation capacity, implement physical policing, and meet the needs of the victims through adequate service delivery. Crime prevention, increase the security and police officers. Increase the security and police officers since they are trained and professionals. Another speaker said the concept of power. Why is a power a problem? Because the citizens have no necessary qualifications to have power on their own. What will happen when citizens given power? What is that they will change in the crime rate? Nothing, but to increase on doing immoral things. Mob justice is wrong and immoral. Wrong accusations to wrong people and committing crimes in citizens. Citizens can take control. Citizens can be taking control, and there is no role for government. Law enforcement, this is our alternative role. Improve the investigation capacity of the crime system, implement targeted visible policing, meet the needs of the victim through adequate service delivery. Again, high crime areas and social crime prevention. Development and implementation of integrated plans for police stations identified in the present leading areas. Continue with intelligence-driven police operations and improve government intelligence profiles. Manage increase in prison inmates and population in high crime areas. Community partnership. We do not disagree with community taking role in this system of helping the government. So we say that community must launch a community mobilization campaign so that we prioritize the police stations to mobilize the community against the crime and support the police. Witnesses protection. Also, the witnesses will be protected through the country's system of justice. Financing the criminal justice system is also the problem in the country. Citizens, they must know that more budget is spent on education systems and other platforms taken. So if we finance the system, the criminal justice system in the country, there will be some improvement, and I'm sure that crimes in high areas will decrease. Moreover, we disagree with this proposal of the Ugandan government in such a way that they believe that citizens must have the power. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank the speakers, and with every debate, we first just going to proceed with just having our adjudicator, because as much as there's speakers in debating, there's still an adjudicator who's just going to give her feedback for what she heard in the debate. And then before I go into my presentation on debating, I'll just open it up to the floor regarding this topic.
Good morning. Good morning. So today's debate, this House believes that countries with high crime rates should give its citizens the power. We had very different ideas from both sides of the House. We see that the debate mostly was centralized around power, justice, the alternatives of this particular problem, which is the justice system failing the people in the country. And also they spoke about the rationality of the people since we've been given them this power. So basically what we got from the opposing side was that this is the last resort or alternative to this particular problem in the country. That's why we need to give 51% of this power to the citizens because of this problem. But you get the opposing side of the House that said that this cannot be done, cannot give citizens this power, and they continuously questioned the rationality of the citizens, and they spoke about how it won't necessarily be that they will have some kind of collective rationality instead of individual rationality that will continue lead to further disadvantages for the society themselves. They also told us about how the alternative will be to instead fix the justice system instead of giving these people the power. I think what was also came up was that because of in this debate, the question was mostly around how. I think that's where the proposal side should have shoulder to the House, mostly how this power they're actually going to utilize it and give practical examples and not only say that there will be some kind of power given to the people. And we also see how they also explain the nature of the countries in which the crime rates are high. And so that in today's debate there were both equally strong teams and they gave more or less answers to these questions basically. Thank you.
Before I proceed with the presentation, is there any hands from the floor with questions regarding this topic necessarily? Because I was asked by Aaron to create a motion around the theme for World Speech Day, which is active citizenship. And I think the most prevalent matter of active citizenship that we could have in South Africa, and that's why we centered around with countries with high crime rates, is specifically about the role that South Africans have to play in addressing the issues of crime in our country, where particularly either the legislative branch, the executive branch, or the people who administer that justice at the lower levels, like police officers, where they necessarily fail. And it's a radical perception to have that citizens' arrest, it's a concept worldwide for citizens to take arrests into their own hands and to administer justice themselves. But also, when citizens take it above that, now end up going towards administering justice on a criminal justice system level and give out sentences and give out punishments with the eyes of deterrent, with the eyes of punishment, with the eyes of getting justice for victims at heart. That becomes important. So if there's anyone that maybe wants to ask a question, or if there's anyone that maybe wants to contribute, you're more than welcome to raise your hands now. So.
I just wanted to say that the problem I have with opening it up and giving the communities the power, we've all read about it practically every month, that a community takes over and you get somebody that was stealing something getting killed. Who's going to control that? Who's going to police that, if I could call it like that? That you don't have a mob just going crazy. And sometimes we've even read about having the wrong perpetrator.
So I think the biggest way that happens in this debate centers around the rationality and the ability to keep the mob justice or citizens' arrest in proportion, whether those actors are rational in terms of going through levels of investigations, the procedures they follow in order to make that specific decision becomes very important. And on the other side, it's the typical point argument of saying, we actually done some more of the radical arguments that come on the side is sometimes mob justice doesn't care if they get the wrong person or not, because it still sends the message out to the community that we will give justice and we will give punishment, and therefore it will deter crimes in the community. It's a very African jurisprudential understanding of the community in terms of how they incorporate justice and the criminal justice system into their networks, and sort of move away from the Western ideals of what justice and jurisprudence necessarily is. So, moving away from the topic, my name is Dwayne van Beek. I have been doing debating for close to 8 years now. I'm a 6th year student at the university. I've got a degree in BSc Human Physiology. I'm currently on the 3rd year of the LLB. And debating has been something that's always helped. And people always assume that debating is merely just a thing where we can come stand up in front of you and we can argue and we can just try and like show who's smarter and show who's bigger and show who's tougher. But it's more what I've, through my journey, especially starting in high school to then university and developing as a debater to the point where I am now, I've taken my idea of debating to a more critical thinking perspective about the world we live in. So instead of just being a debater of points and having a whole bunch of like stock standard arguments ready in my head that I can just use to apply to any situation, I use it more for critical thinking about the societies we live in, the world we live in, the kinds of decisions we make as human beings. And I've always tried to incorporate that in daily life because I feel debating as a style of persuasion and an art of persuasion is far more than just you presenting points. It's you're able to justify a particular stance and opinion that everyone in the world is entitled to have. Everyone is entitled to a freedom of opinion, a freedom of association, a freedom of religion, a freedom of political choice, and anything like that. And debating allows you to make that informed decision to actually associate with whatever views you have, but then also be able to back it up and prove that you need to have some level of substance to make those particular decisions. I started off at the schools level, so I can see many of the schools children here. I would have loved during my primary school years especially to have debating at more of a primary school level, because it sort of only kicks in the South African circuits at around high school, and then often we have grade 8s and grade 9s coming in very unaware as to what it means to think, what it means to have an opinion, and then they get thrust into an environment where it becomes very valuable to have those opinions in their classrooms and in the societies as young generations coming into the society. So when you only allow for a young, a teenager to have an opinion at 14 and they didn't know how to construct it, it becomes very difficult for them to have a positionality in society, whereas that could have come across at a much younger age. I started only in grade 11 because I was still very much interested in sports during high school and in socializing and friends and all that kind of stuff, and I felt I missed out on a few good years to gain a bit more experience. But ended up moving from the school's debating arena into the university debating arena, which was jumping into the deep end of the swimming pool and not knowing how to swim necessarily. And there I had to pick up my own feet and do a lot of research into the world, into myself, into the kinds of views I hold, but then also train. And it's the biggest part of debating. It's Aaron will tell you in public speaking, there's as much as you can stand up and you can be a good arguer with your friends about whether Chelsea is better than Arsenal in football or whether this celebrity is better than this celebrity in music. You need to have a level of organization in the argumentation, in your thought processes that help in the presentation of many things. And I started nationals, on the national circuit universities. We debate at basically all the universities in the country, and then it climaxes to one big tournament nationally, which is called the South African National Debating Championships. I've been a countless quarterfinalist at those tournaments, semi-finalist, and top 10 ranking speaker. It's a very, very competitive environment of close to maybe 500 absolutely brilliant South African students from their universities, where it becomes this intellectual dogfight between all of us to justify not just who's smarter, but just to justify who is better able to express opinions and persuade adjudicators to their specific points. And then it moves to a continental level where we have the Pan-Africanist Debating Championships, and that takes place this year it's in Ghana, for example. And then I'm I think I'm the only one here from the debating squad has been to the World University Debating Championships, which was held last year in Cape Town. This year it's going to Thailand and then to Korea the next year. And that's where we start debating against the likes of Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Harvard, and the likes thereof. And try and put South Africa's name as debaters on the map. And the topics often flow around issues of politics. This is global politics, regional politics to specific countries. It's economics on a macro and micro level. It's legal justice. It's criminal justice. It's morality. It's environmental rights. And we'll often go through about 15 motions in about a 7-day period that discusses all of these topics so that it makes us need to have to do research on all these aspects of humanity, morality, choice, rights, the environment, criminal justice, etc., etc. So we're able to hold our own against these individuals at these moments. And I've had many successes on the debating circuit through the training and everything. But that's why I said debating expands further than just the debating arena. It expands to life in general. I used to be quite a shy individual at high school. I sort of used to let my sporting talents speak for themselves. And that's all I had to do in terms of speaking. I couldn't do speeches in English. I couldn't do speeches in Afrikaans. When I was doing French in high school, I couldn't present in front of the classroom. They often asked us to do presentations at the science expos, and I got scared when it was just 2 individuals standing in front of me asking me questions about that expo that I had to present on. And debating brought out not necessarily confidence, because for speaking, I feel the way you elicit that confidence is just having an understanding and having an order to your thoughts. Because often, a lot of the time, people who struggle with speaking at first have the ideas in their head, but don't necessarily have the order and structure in which to say them. And then it becomes very difficult for them to be able to express those opinions or express those views. And debating brought that level of structure and confidence. Not into necessarily what I'm saying, because I could stand up here and argue Jordan Patterson anti-feminist arguments all day and be extremely radical, but he's still able to get those opinions out because he's got a level of structure to his understanding. It's not necessarily always the content, but the way you're able to get that information out. I, in 2015, applied to work at the campus radio station on Tux FM, and I thought this was a big step, just doing debating for a few years. I got in. I'm now currently the breakfast presenter at Tux FM. I've had job offers at KFM and at YFM and 5FM that I've turned down because of my degree, but it's allowed me to enter into that radio network. I have done countless TED Talks involving LGBTQI activism and LGBTQI rights and minority rights in South Africa, and I was able to present to 10,000, 50,000 people purely because I was able just to get my orders and my structure of thinking in order. I was an SRC representative for the University of Pretoria. I was a youth council member at Gauteng legislature. I had represented Tshwane council legislature, all because I was able to use what I've learned in debating to help me in the political arena, to help me in the radio arena, even to help me with just study. For me to be able to form an argument, I'm running a public law semester just tonight, which I haven't really studied for, but I'm able, through debating, to learn the skills of just understanding information and then formulating an argument to present it at a test level and then get the marks because I was able to present what I had learned. And that's the skill, because what we teach in debating necessarily is how to formulate an argument, how to signpost, how to create titles for your argument, how to then set burdens necessarily that your argument needs to prove, how to provide reasonable and rational context to what your argument wants to discuss. So a question of how, a question of what are the mechanisms. So if I'm going to say that this house will impose a death penalty, what are the mechanisms that the death penalty will try and achieve? Why necessarily, why are we going to enact this kind of policy, and then who these policies necessarily affect? So who are going to be the actors who feel these policies? And what I've always done with the kids I coach, because I coach at St. Albans and at Afrikaans Racist School, is that you could use these in general circumstances. My example to them is if I would just ask my parents for me to buy or for them to give me money for shoes or for me to go out with my friends, I would use that same level of argumentation style to try and persuade them for me to get what I want. Okay, so what's the mechanism? I'm going to pay you back if you give me the money now, and how long of a period of of time, and then with interest possibly. And then why do I want these shoes? No, because my friends are all getting these new shoes, or my friends are all going to be at this party, and I really, really want to go to this party. Who cares? I care. Like, if I don't go to this party, I'm going to be really upset, and I'm just going to be turned into an introvert, and I don't know whether I'm ever going to like have friends again. It's using those same mechanisms of how to present an argument in a debating structure that can even help you in life. It can help you when you express opinions with your friends, when you express your opinions in class, when you're writing argumentative essays, with whatever you're doing. That's what debating can do in a larger context and a broader scale than just necessarily in a debating room where you have 7 minutes to express an argument. So that's what I found debating to be, and why I think debating is so valuable. I'm not necessarily a public speaker. I've never really found the interest. I'm not a creative person. I'm a very logical person. And that's why I think Aaron would be the best to explain the dynamics of public speaking. But debating is definitely something that I find is extremely important in countries that require people to have opinions and require people to be critical thinkers. Too often we have societies and political parties and universities and teachers who give information to students and give information to young generations, and they almost ask never to question the information they're being given. They're just asked to absorb, memorize, and then just spew it out to the next generations, or spew it out into whatever context they have. And that's why I think World Speech Day is important, to incorporate things like debating, because it allows us to question the information we're being given, and it allows us to actually challenge the popular narratives. Without ideas of debating, and without ideas of being able to be a critical thinker, we would have never had civil rights movements, we would have never had movements that sought to achieve the rights of certain individuals and fight for rights of individuals, whether they be majority or minority rights. No one would have ever been able to speak out against injustices without a level of critical thinking and being able to form an opinion and form an argument against it. And that's why to this day I still find that debating is extremely valuable, and hopefully it can resonate with the students who are here, but also with the larger community, that it's something that should be incorporated into our universities, our schooling systems, and larger societies as a whole.